It's an alliteration day. A lot of PPP. The things I say on the internet. Hello, my name is Natalie, and welcome to the Boardgaymergirl channel. If you're new here, I look at board games from a primarily solo perspective. And today we are doing another episode of my series called Solo Mode Check for now. And it's a series that was derived from wanting to play multiplayer games solo and wondering if the game would be worth it if I only ever played it solo. So today, the first game in this point series is Point Salad, and it sets up the base set of the game where you're basically playing a card game where you're collecting different types of cards, in this game salad, so vegetables, to score different kinds of points. And you'll be drafting these cards openly from a table, but sadly in this one there is no solo mode. So poo-poo on Point Salad. Then came Point City, and Point City is kind of the new big brother of Point Salad. It changed up the way that the cards are laid out to start the game. So instead of 3 separate decks, you have one deck where you're taking all the cards from to place in a 4x4 grid where you'll still be taking 2 cards on your draft turn. However, you'll be building up a city. So you'll be having to collect different city-like resources in order to build structures. And depending on if you're taking resources or building those structures, you will refill that area with the opposite structure. At the end of the game, it's still the person with the most points wins, but it has a special extra different dash of a point collection. The last one and latest one is Point Galaxy. So screw a city, we're not even gonna go to countries, we're just going to outer space. So Point Galaxy feels like it returns more to the first sibling of the series and the oldest sibling of the series, Point Salad. But in this one, it gives us a solo mode that is great. You're going back to that grid-like structure where you have 3 separate decks where you'll be flipping new cards into this 2x3 area to pick cards. Now, before we get further into our little discussion of the point series, we'll go through a little bit of an overview of both of the modes that have solo, so Point City and Point Galaxy. And then we will come back and do a little comparison on both of these games. First, similar to the multiplayer game, you will have to separate into 3 decks and set aside a set amount of cards from each of these decks. You will also set out 10 civic tokens, and these will be put into a line for solo. You'll then be creating the play area, which is a 4x4 set of resource cards on the table, and there are 5 different resources. So there's ecology, there's energy, there's economy, there's community, and there's industry. These 5 resource types help set up your city. Before you select your 2 cards to draft for the round, you may flip over a card in a single row or column if they are all resources. So this is a free action that you can perform. This is a building card, and the cost of that card is displayed on the bottom part, along with a permanent resource once you have this building paid for in your area. Now you may perform the mandatory part of your turn, which means drafting 2 cards from the grid area. In this example, you draft 2 orthogonally adjacent cards in the row. These are resources, so when you go to refill them, you will refill them with structures. You may also draft structures, but you will need to pay the cost that is indicated at the bottom of the structure. The solo player will draft cards based on 2 coordinate markers. One is at the first card in the first column, and the second one is at the second card in the second row. This example shows that you will take the card that intersects with the coordinate tokens and the one below it. You will refill it the same way that you do. Their markers will move 1 space, And it is important to note that for structure cards, they do not have to pay the resources indicated. They will just draft these cards into their area. In this example again, they look at the coordinates and they pick these two cards, always the top and the bottom one underneath it. This will change in the third one, where the top card closest to the point city marker on the column and the bottom card closest to the bottom marker are the cards that are drafted. The solo AI will also collect Civ tokens, just like you do in the regular game. When this icon is on a structure that you create and put into your area, you'll have the choice of taking a Civ token. But for the AI, they will take a Civ token from the first available in the row you constructed at the beginning of the game. When the draw pile is empty, so sad for you. No, this is the end of the game, and you will have to see if you have beaten the Atoma. The Atoma scores differently than you do. You will score points regularly, but the Atoma will score points based on your difficulty. These variances will depend on resources, Civ tokens, and collected structures. To start the game, you will split the deck up into 3 piles. Those piles will flip over into planet cards. Then you'll take 10 rocket ships and you'll put those tokens in a line. Each player will start with a starting sun card in their area. There will also be a leftover Point Galaxy token that you'll use for the AI player around the grid. On anybody's turn, they can draft 2 cards. There can be any drafts from the 2x3 grid, any of the 3 decks, and you can mix and match where you take your cards from. You'll take these cards into your area, and then you'll refill the grid from the deck that you took a card from. When drafting a planet, take note of the number in the top left-hand corner. This number can't be duplicated in a single column. You will need to make a new solar system column with that card. You then refill the row and continue with your play. At the end of your turn, evaluate how many rockets you have. If you have 5, you can select one of the tokens up above for scoring bonuses at the end of the game. The next cards are moon cards, and these will only score if you have the designated color above or below. If you have a double moon card, you will need one of the colors above and the other color below for it to score. The AI will draft 2 cards closest to the point of its rocket token. In this example, it takes 2 cards from the tops of these piles. At the end of its turn, it will evaluate if it has 5 rockets, and then they will grab the leftmost rocket token. At the end of their turn, they move the rocket to the right as they continue to go around the perimeter. If they draft a planet card, this will need to be a unique planet card to stay in the same solar system, otherwise they create a new solar system. The AI just collects asteroid cards into its area. But for the solo player, when they collect asteroids, they will need to have a sun present for them to tuck the asteroid card in behind it. They would not be able to collect another asteroid in this example. At the end of 13 rounds, you will score. Asteroids are scored based on your comparison to the AI bot. You will score for your sun cards and the different planet colors in your solar systems. You will score for your planet numbers in consecutive order and how many you collected. You'll score for your moons if you collected the correct planets, along with your rockets. All of this information is on your setup aid, and you would score as you would in the multiplayer game. The AI will score points based on the difficulty setting that you set out in the beginning of the game, either easy, medium, or hard. So I hope this isn't too confusing. We shall see. I don't know. It's my first time trying to do a video like this one. But the reason that I am thinking of doing these games together is to both point out the similarities and the differences of the games, both for multiplayer and for solo, and the differences in how they would be in my collection if I only played them solo, and what you'd miss out on for the multiplayer experience. So both of the games have the same designers, like I've said. They both deal with cards. They're both drafting cards. They both take 2 cards from the middle area of whatever the tableau is in Point City and Point Galaxy. And both of the solo modes use a extra token to go around the field of cards in order to determine their choices, which is both easy and straightforward to figure out while you're going through. As well, both modes have variability in difficulty based on changing the point differences of the cards that the AI character would be collecting over the turn of the game. So, Point City is what we'll talk about first. So in this one, it diverts from Point Salad and Point Galaxy because it is going by a 4x4 grid instead of the well-known 3 decks of cards and a 2x3 grid. In this one, you are more similar to Point Salad in that you are collecting resources that can buy you buildings, and those buildings give you permanent resources that can help you build up your engine to go acquire more of certain types of buildings. All the cards can have points. There are points for the resources that you have at the end of the game, and you also have point tokens at the end of the game. So in this game, there's Civ tokens, but you only can get a Civ token based on collecting a particular card while you're going through the game. This one I found, again, the most different from the other ones. It's got some similarities closest to Point Salad. The comparison with Point Galaxy, I find, is more about the solo mode, and then obviously each one having tokens in the game, and then some cards that will score. But Point Galaxy has a different way of picking up cards and kind of throws resources out the frickin' window. This one I also find is a little bit more thinky than the other two, but let's get into Point Galaxy now. So Point Galaxy is similar to Point Salad in the 3 decks, but it has the 2x3 grid, and you're not collecting cards for resources. You are collecting cards for their numerical value to put them into certain solar systems where you will score based on the different variety of numbers that you have in your solar system at the end of the game. So, as mentioned, can't remember the example, but if you put a 1 down, if you put a 3 down underneath one of your columns to start it, that's fine. But once you place a new card on top of it, you're telling the direction of how you want your card values to go. So if it's a 3 and then you go for a 4, then you're going in ascending order. Or if you tuck the 4 behind the 3, then you're going in descending order. You can only go one of 2 ways except for the wormhole. So I find that Point Galaxy kind of has the most nuance to it compared to the other two. There's a lot of variability in the different types of cards compared to the other two. It's resources or structures in the other games. There are wild cards in Point City, which is a change. But in Point Galaxy, you've got planets, you've got moons, you've got suns, and you've got asteroids. And then you're looking for rockets, and you're looking for different research icons to score at the end of the game. And then you also have your point tokens if you collect them during the game. And while it sounds like a more complicated game, I do think that Point Galaxy is almost the easier game compared to Point City. Point City, I find, they're both light games, to be honest, but I feel like Point City, you are building up to look for particular structures that you're going to be buying, and you need a set amount of certain resources in order to do that. For the Point Galaxy one, you're not building up resources for that point. You're just looking for different numbers and hoping that they come out or that you can draw them, or to get certain cards for scoring, or the moons, or the wormhole in order to reset your counting solar system. So both of these are very well done. So both end up as competitive experiences, and I do appreciate that both of the games have variability. So there are easy, medium, and hard difficulties that just change the number of points that the AI character would get for any of those cards collected in their area at the end of the game. But for multiplayer, what I would think that you'd be missing out, or the differences in the games, is I think the AI play of either game is more of a puzzle and an efficiency puzzle that you're analyzing how to do things. To a degree, obviously, it's a flip of a card and you're working with what best comes out. But when you're playing with a multiplayer game and there are individuals obviously at the table, they will obviously choose optimal cards or try to see what you're doing and almost do a take that move, which is possible, but it's very rare in this case, I believe, in drafting. But when you're playing solo, you can predict what the AI character will be taking on each of their turns. And therefore, you want to plan ahead to what you're going to take and what you're giving to the AI. So, say in Point City, if you end up taking 2 resources in a row and column that the AI would be picking those cards out next, then you know you're giving them structures which would score higher than if you gave them resources. So you might want to wait until the AI moves a little bit further in order to take those cards. In Point Galaxy, you can't guess as much, so I don't find it as much of an analytical efficiency puzzle, but it is fun and it's faster, I think, because on Point City, you're spent thinking a little bit more. Point Galaxy, you can quickly make a decision, and there's so many different cards and different types of things you can put together for that one. So either one, when you're playing with other people, I find that is the biggest difference in how you're approaching and playing the game. Both are still fairly quick when you're playing solo. I do think that Point Galaxy probably plays quicker, and Point City takes a little bit more time just for thinking, but I would even think for setting up, as you have those tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cards that you have to set aside and do your shuffling differently. And then Point Galaxy, it's kind of the same thing as Point Salad, where you can just have your deck, you cut out those cards just for the one deck, set them in their 3 piles, and you get to going. Would I say that these games are worth it for the solo experience only? To be honest, I think it's accessible enough to do multiplayer, but for a light puzzle game, I would say both of them could fit on your shelf, depending on what you're looking for. If you've never played a point game before, so if you like more analytical efficiency puzzles while doing card drafting, then I would go with Point City. But ultimately, I still find Point Galaxy as my favorite of the 3 series. And yeah, that is how this goes. We shall see what I get up to next time. If there are games that you would like me to look into for just their solo play, let me know in the comments below. If you made it to the end of this video, put point in the comments, because you know I like to see things in the comments from y'all that reference the end of this video, so that I see how many people actually listen to me blab for a very long period of time. Anyways, I will see you in the next one. Have a good evening. If it's an evening, it's an evening for me. So goodbye.